The day Liam ended things with me, the sky was clear, but my world fell silent. I still remember his exact words. Not because they were cruel, but because they were empty. Like he couldn't even muster enough guilt to make it hurt properly. "I just think we're going in different directions," he had said. Different directions. After 4 years of building a life together. After planning a future with the apartment we had just finished decorating. After birthdays, holidays, after introducing me to his mother, who had started texting me separately just to chat. He ended it in under 5 minutes. Then walked out without even taking the coffee I had just made him. That was Liam. Beautiful. Charming. A man whose smile made strangers trust him. And whose silence could make the strongest person second-guess everything. I didn't cry that day. I didn't scream. I just sat on the couch for hours staring at the 2 mugs, one full, one untouched. I told myself it was probably temporary. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe something had triggered him. Maybe he'd call by nightfall. He didn't. That night I went to bed in the shirt he left on the chair. Smelled like him. Like bergamot and vanilla. Like hope that still hadn't died. The days that followed were a blur. I deleted our photos. Then restored them. Then deleted them again. I tried going to our favorite cafe, the one with the oversweet lemon pies and antique spoons, but I couldn't walk past the door. Everywhere reminded me of him. His jokes. His hands. The way he used to whisper my name like it was a prayer. And then the pictures started. First on a mutual friend's feed. Then on his. Liam. With her. The new girl. Smiling. Laughing. Arm wrapped around her waist like he had never done to me in public. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. She was beautiful, yes. But she looked effortless. Like she hadn't fought to be chosen. Like she had simply shown up. And he had handed her everything I had begged to earn. It shattered me. But not in the way I expected. It didn't just hurt. It rewrote everything I thought we had. I began to pull away. From friends. From routines. Even from myself. I lost weight. Not because I was trying to, but because food tasted like sawdust. I stopped replying to messages. Avoided mirrors. Started sleeping on one side of the bed out of habit. Everyone told me I'd bounce back. That I was better off. That he didn't deserve me. But none of their words mattered. Because what they didn't understand was that Liam had been more than my boyfriend. He had been my future. My center. My answer to every question I asked myself when I thought about who I wanted to be. Then came the call. A number I knew by heart. No need to check the screen. I answered out of reflex. Hey. That voice. Smooth. Familiar. Detached. Hi, I replied, my own voice hoarse from not being used. A beat of silence. I was just wondering how you were doing, he said. I didn't know whether to laugh or hang up. Why? Another pause. Then, I don't know. Just curious. You disappeared. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I had to, I said quietly. He sighed. You know, I thought about you yesterday. I passed by that noodle place you liked. Of course he did. Of course he'd drop breadcrumbs of nostalgia now that I had become unreachable. Liam. Why are you really calling? A pause. I had a dream. You were crying. And I woke up feeling, I don't know, bad. I said nothing. I guess I just wanted to see if you were okay. I almost replied. Almost said something comforting. Almost fell back into that old script where I softened every blow he delivered. But then I remembered. The photos. The girl. The silence. And I said the one thing I knew would haunt him more than any tear. I'm doing really well, Liam. He hesitated. That's good. Then. Can we meet? Just once. I could hear it in his voice. He wanted to see me break. He wanted proof that I still cared. He wanted control again. And for a moment, a fragile moment, I considered it. But then I looked down at the ring on my finger. The one placed there by a man who didn't just want me in memories or moments. He wanted me in full. I'm sorry, Liam, I said calmly. I can't meet you. Why not? I smiled. Because I'm married now. The silence on the line was heavy. He didn't speak. Didn't hang up. Just breathed. The sound of a man who had called to witness my grief, but heard my peace instead. I ended the call. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't look back at the screen. The morning after that call, I woke up in a different home, in a different life. No trace of Liam's scent on the pillows. No silence clinging to the walls like a ghost of something half forgotten. Just the soft breathing of the man lying beside me, Daniel. My husband. He had no idea Liam called. And I didn't tell him. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I didn't want Liam's name to take up space here. In this home. In this warmth. Daniel stirred beside me, pulling me closer in his sleep. Even unconscious, he reached for me. And that single wordless action reminded me of everything I had now. Everything I used to dream about when I was with Liam. I turned and kissed Daniel's shoulder gently. Not out of guilt, but in gratitude. Because this life I was living, this love I had was not a rebound. It was a rebirth. Later that day, I walked into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep. Daniel was already there making coffee. "Morning, love," he said with that familiar half-smile. He slid my cup toward me without asking how I liked it, because he already knew. I stood there for a moment watching him move. His calm, his ease, the way he existed without making me feel small or invisible. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just thinking." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "Don't overdo it. You've earned peace." And just like that, the noise in my chest quieted, because that was Daniel. He didn't want to fix me. He just wanted to be present while I fixed myself. I sat by the window that afternoon, flipping through an old journal, the one I kept before I met Daniel. The pages were littered with entries about Liam, some hopeful, some desperate, most painful. I had written things like, "Maybe if I become more patient, he'll see me." I didn't cry today, but my chest still hurts. I think I love him more than he's capable of understanding. Reading those words felt like reading someone else's grief. A younger version of me who hadn't learned yet that love shouldn't be begged for. That girl didn't know how to leave, but she eventually did. And now here I was, married, peaceful, untouched by the ghosts I used to serve tea to. A week passed before Liam called again. This time I didn't answer.
No hesitaste.
No temptation. Just decline. And done. He didn't leave a message. But later that night, a private message arrived on social media. A photo. From 3 years ago. Me, Liam, and his dog at the beach. I was laughing at something off camera, sun catching in my hair. He had captioned it, "Back when you used to look at me like I was the only one." I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. No response. No reaction. Because I had nothing to prove anymore. No need to remind him of who I had been. He already knew. And now it was too late. That weekend, Daniel and I took a short trip to a mountain cottage. Just 2 days.
No phones. No noise.
We walked through trails lined with moss-covered trees and wildflowers. Sat by a fire wrapped in blankets. Ate simple food and laughed like we had known each other in a past life too. On the second night, he handed me a small box. My heart jumped. Not because I was nervous, but because I didn't expect anything. Inside was a necklace. Simple. Delicate. A silver thread with a tiny knot in the center. "It's called the unbreakable bond," he said. I ran my fingers over it. "You don't have to give me things to prove anything," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But I like giving you things. Because you never asked for anything, and yet, you've given me peace." Tears stung my eyes. Not from pain. From healing. And that night, I wore the necklace to bed. Just as I had once worn Liam's shirt. Only this time I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to come back. I felt like I was finally home. 2 weeks passed. No more calls. No more messages. Just silence. I should have felt relieved. But instead there was a strange quiet ache. Not for Liam, but for the part of me that used to need him. That part had died gently. Not with drama, but with distance. And sometimes the absence of pain feels even heavier than the pain itself. I went back to the city for a work meeting, the same city Liam and I had lived in together. It felt strange being there without the usual sting. The corners we kissed in. The parks we walked through. The apartment building with our old unit on the 6th floor. Everything was the same. Only I had changed. After the meeting, I wandered through a bookstore we used to visit on lazy Sundays. It was still there. Still smelled like aged paper and ink. I picked up a poetry collection and sat in the same corner we used to share. And then I saw him. Across the room. Like he had stepped out of a memory. Liam. Alone. Hair slightly longer, sweater rumpled, eyes distant. He hadn't seen me. For a moment I just watched him. He looked different. Not older. Just less sure of himself. He picked up a book, flipped through it and let out a long sigh. That was the sigh of a man searching for something he didn't know how to name. And then he looked up. Our eyes met. There was a beat, long enough to hold every word we never said. Then I turned back to my book. I didn't leave. Didn't hide. Just read. Because I had nothing to run from anymore. He approached slowly. Leah. I looked up calm. Liam. He swallowed hard. Wow. You look great. Thank you. Are you here for work? Yes. Pause. I didn't think I'd see you here. I didn't think I'd care if I did. His face twitched at that. Not with anger, but with realization. Can we talk? He asked. I closed the book. I don't think that's necessary. There's a lot I didn't say. I nodded. I know. I was a coward. I thought she was easier. That she'd need me less. I said nothing. And she did. But not in the way I wanted. She didn't love me. You didn't love me either, I said quietly. His eyes widened. I did. I just didn't know how to do it right. That's not love, Liam. That's guilt dressed as regret. He blinked. I'm sorry, he whispered. I believe you, I said. But I don't need it anymore. Another pause. Are you happy? I nodded. Deeply. He smiled, sad and small. I'm glad, he said. And then he stepped back. Didn't ask for my number. Didn't offer to meet again. He just nodded and walked away. For real this time. And the strange thing? I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. Because I had already walked away long before he realized I was gone. Later that evening I told Daniel about it. He listened, patient as always, never interrupting. When I was done he asked, Do you feel okay? I nodded. I didn't even flinch, I said. It's like, he was just another man in a bookstore. Daniel reached across the table and held my hand. Because that's all he ever was. I smiled. And in that moment I realized, Liam wasn't a heartbreak. He was a detour. Daniel wasn't the fix. He was the destination. And I had finally arrived. A week after running into Liam at the bookstore, I received another message. From a different account this time. One he probably didn't know I could still recognize. An old backup email we used to share event tickets and bank reminders through. I know it's late. I know it's over. But I can't stop thinking about what you said. About how guilt isn't love. You were right. And I'm sorry for not realizing sooner. There was no request to meet. No question mark. Just a confession hanging in digital air. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because the message wasn't for me, it was for him. He wasn't asking to be forgiven. He was trying to forgive himself. And that wasn't my job anymore. Life with Daniel continued in its soft rhythm. He never asked too much. He never made me feel like I had to earn the love he gave so freely. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me like he was seeing something rare. Not with intensity, but with quiet understanding. Like he could tell I had been broken once. And loved me even more for the way I stitched myself back together. We started talking about buying a home. Something small. With a garden. A room for art. And a window seat where I could read. Nothing extravagant. Just something that felt permanent. He asked me one evening if I had any non-negotiables. I thought about it for a moment and then said, Peace. And sunlight. He nodded. I can give you both. And somehow I believed him without hesitation. Because he never promised grand things. He just delivered the quiet ones. I kept painting. More often than ever. But now the colors were lighter. The brush strokes calmer. Not every canvas held a story of sorrow. Some just held wind, leaves, and soft shadows. One afternoon I painted a woman standing on a bridge, facing away from the viewer. Her posture wasn't broken. Just still. A gallery visitor stood in front of it for nearly 10 minutes. Then she turned to me and said, She's waiting for no one. And I smiled. Exactly. A few nights later, Daniel came home with a tiny bouquet of wildflowers.
No ekatzen. No epalegi.
Just because he had seen them on his way back and thought of me. He placed them in a jar and set it on the kitchen table. You always liked little things that survive in the wild, he said. And I realized something. That's what I had become. Not fragile. Not bitter. Just a wildflower. Resilient. Beautiful in ways not everyone could see at first glance. I never told Daniel much about Liam. He never pried. Only asked once early on, "Did he love you?" And I had replied, "I think he loved the idea of me." But he never stayed long enough to know the rest. Daniel only nodded. "I'm not leaving," he had said. And he never did. Months passed. And then one morning a package arrived. No sender listed. Just my name. No return address. Inside, an old journal. Mine. The one I thought I had lost during my move after Liam. I flipped through the pages. There were sticky notes attached. His handwriting. Underlined lines. Little remarks. This entry, "You were hurting so much, and I didn't even see it. You were already slipping away here. And I was too busy pretending I was fine. I'm sorry. I was selfish. You were gold. And I treated you like background noise." My hands trembled, not from pain, but from the overwhelming strangeness of it. He had read my silence. Too late. But still he had read it. I closed the journal, wrapped it back in the package, and placed it in a box marked past. Because that's where it belonged now. I didn't burn it. Didn't throw it away. I just let it rest. Like a story I'd already outgrown. Spring turned into early summer, and our lives settled into something peaceful. Mornings began with shared glances across coffee mugs. Evenings ended with music drifting from our living room speaker. Daniel humming absently while he read the news aloud. I still painted almost every day. Only now my work wasn't about pain. It was about movement, space, the distance between who I used to be and who I had finally become. One piece caught a lot of attention. A woman faceless dancing barefoot in a field under storm-colored skies. Her body was strong. Her arms wide open. There was no one else in the frame. A local art critic called it the triumph of solitude. I didn't correct him. But in my head I whispered, not solitude, selfhood. Daniel and I planned a short trip to the coast. Quiet getaway, just the two of us. We stayed in a wooden cabin with windows that overlooked the sea. On our second night there, we stood on the back porch, watching waves crash against the rocks. Daniel turned to me, voice low. "Do you ever regret any of it? What happened before?" I thought for a long time before answering. Not anymore. Because if none of it had happened, I wouldn't be here. With you. He reached over and touched my hand. "I don't need to be your healing," he said. "I just want to be your calm after the storm." And in that moment I realized, that was the difference between Liam and Daniel. Liam had always wanted to be needed. Daniel simply wanted to be chosen. A week after we returned from the coast, I received a final message. This time from Liam's personal email. No hidden numbers. No second accounts. Just him. "This will be the last time I reach out. I found your exhibit online. I saw the woman dancing under storm clouds. She reminded me of you, not the you I knew but the one I never took time to understand. I hope you're well. I hope you don't think I'm trying to win anything back. I just wanted to say you mattered. You still do. And I'm sorry that I only figured that out when it was too late." No attachment. No question. Just words. Final ones. I stared at the message for a moment. Not because I was tempted to reply, but because I realized something. He was no longer speaking to the girl he left behind. He was speaking to the woman she became. And she had no use for his closure. She had already written her own. That night I took out a new canvas. I didn't know what I would paint, but I knew it wouldn't be about Liam. It would be about growth. About breath. About how freedom doesn't always look like breaking chains. Sometimes it just looks like no longer checking your phone for someone who won't call anymore. I didn't respond to Liam. I didn't need to. His silence had once crushed me. Now mine returned the favor. Daniel brought home fresh flowers that evening. He placed them on the kitchen counter and turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded. Just putting a chapter to rest. He kissed my forehead. Then let's write a new one. By late summer, our home had grown into a sanctuary. The garden Daniel planted in spring had started to bloom, tiny pops of color peeking through every inch of soil. He watered the plants each morning like they were fragile secrets. I sometimes watched from the porch, coffee in hand, wondering how someone so steady found me. We weren't dramatic. We didn't argue for passion. We didn't crash into each other like firestorms. We just worked. Some nights we played card games on the floor. Others we didn't talk much at all. Just sat side by side, breathing in the same quiet. And somehow it was enough. More than enough. I started painting large-scale canvases. Not because I had something big to say, but because I finally had the space to say it. One piece in particular kept pulling something out of me. A woman standing in front of a burning house. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She was calm, watching it burn, holding a watering can. People asked what it meant. Forgiveness, I said. And they always tilted their heads, as if waiting for the real explanation. But that was the truth. I had forgiven Liam. Not for his sake. For mine. Because hate is a chain just as heavy as heartbreak. And I had already carried enough. My mother visited one weekend. She walked through the house with thoughtful eyes, her fingers brushing against the artwork, the books, the air. At dinner, she placed her napkin down and asked softly, "Do you miss him?" She didn't need to name him. I shook my head. Not anymore. I miss who I thought he was. But even that fades. She nodded. Love changes us. I know, I said. But losing the wrong love teaches us who we were before we forgot. That night, Daniel and I lay in bed, both staring at the ceiling. I think I want to write again, I said suddenly. He turned to me. Then write. It might be messy. Then let it be. And so I did. I started scribbling down the story of a girl who used to wait by her phone. A girl who used to cry quietly on the bathroom floor. A girl who kept showing up for a man who never once looked back. And by chapter 5, I realized the story wasn't about Liam. It was about the girl who survived him. A publishing contact I knew from my art shows reached out. She had read a few entries I posted anonymously on a women's forum. Would you consider turning this into a book? She asked. I hesitated. It's raw. It's personal. That's exactly why it matters. Daniel didn't pressure me either way. He just said, tell it your way. Whether it's for the world, or just for you. I chose both. Because healing deserves an audience, even if it's just yourself years from now rereading your own survival. One afternoon while cleaning an old box, I found a single photo. Me and Liam, sitting on a blanket in the park. I was leaning against him, eyes closed. He was looking at his phone. That photo told a story I hadn't seen at the time. How I always leaned in, and how he never looked up. I didn't rip it, didn't burn it. I just slid it back into the box, closed the lid, and returned it to the closet. Because not everything has to be destroyed. Some things just need to be put away. The first draft of the book came together in the fall. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat. It didn't follow traditional story arcs. But it was real. It told the story of a woman who had been patient, forgiving, loving, to everyone except herself. And it didn't end with revenge. It ended with peace. Because what she finally wanted wasn't to be loved back by the wrong person, but to love herself enough not to beg for less. The publisher loved it. They said it was relatable, intimate, sharp but soft. They offered to fast-track it for spring release. I held the contract in my hand, heart strangely steady. I wasn't doing this to get back at anyone. I was doing this so no girl would ever sit in a bathroom stall crying into her sleeve, thinking she wasn't enough because someone never called back. This wasn't a book. It was a mirror. And I hoped it would help someone recognize their own reflection. Daniel read it in one sitting. When he finished, he closed the laptop, looked at me and said, I didn't know you were this brave back then. I shook my head. I wasn't. But writing it helped me meet the girl who was becoming brave. He kissed my hand. She deserved better. I'm glad she found it. A journalist reached out for an interview. Young, bright. She had read the manuscript early and called it a love letter to the girl who outgrew chasing. She asked me the usual questions, process, healing, inspiration. But then she asked, do you think he'll read it? Liam. I paused. I don't know, I said truthfully. Would you want him to? No, I said after a beat. But I hope he sees it on a shelf one day. I hope he opens it thinking it's about him. And I hope he realizes halfway through that it's not. She smiled. That's the most powerful kind of story. I attended the cover shoot a week later. They wanted a photo of me holding a paintbrush, a blank canvas behind me. A metaphor for starting over. I wore white, hair down, no heavy makeup. The photographer said, "Look into the lens like you've just walked away from your past, and it didn't break you." I smiled softly, because I had, and it hadn't. In a quiet moment that evening, I asked Daniel, "Do you think I'm being unfair?" He looked at me puzzled. For writing it. For telling the truth. He set his tea down. Your truth isn't an attack. It's a survival story. I nodded slowly. Then, what if people think I'm bitter? Then they've never healed from anything. And with that, I stopped worrying about how it would be received. Because the right people would find it. And the wrong ones would simply move along. Just like Liam had. A few days later, I got a text from an old college friend. Just saw your book promo. Can't believe it's really happening. Also saw Liam a few weeks ago. He looked different, tired, like someone who reads stories in bookstores hoping to find a version of himself that ended better. I stared at the message for a while, then closed it. Because Liam's story had already ended. Mine was just beginning. The day the book launched, it rained. Not in a gloomy way, more like a cleansing rhythmic tapping on glass. Like a final benediction from the past. Daniel drove me to the small bookstore downtown where the release event was being held. The same one where I had once seen Liam. Where I had looked up from a poetry book and met the ghost of a boy I once loved. Now the shelves held my name. Not as someone's ex. Not as someone's mistake. But as an author. As a woman who rewrote her ending. The room filled slowly. Strangers. Friends. Readers who'd followed my art online for years. A few familiar faces from college, older now, gentler around the edges. I gave a short reading. My voice didn't shake. I read the passage where the main character, based on me, finally throws away the love letter she never received replies to. The audience sat in silence. One woman in the back wiped her cheek quietly. When it was over, there was applause. Not the kind that erupts from obligation, but the kind that rises slowly from understanding. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in years. Seen. Not as decoration. Not as a stepping stone. Not as a supporting character. But as the lead. In my own story. After the signing, I stepped outside for air. The rain had stopped. Everything smelled like earth. And then a familiar voice. Leah. I turned slowly. Liam stood a few steps away. Drenched. Holding a copy of the book. Of course he had come. I wasn't sure if I should, he said. But I needed to. I looked at the book in his hand. Did you read it? He nodded. All of it. And he looked down. It broke me a little. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't angry. It was honest. I waited. He looked up again. There were parts one didn't recognize. Not because they weren't true, but because I never asked. I said nothing. I think I wanted to see you cry one more time. But now I realize you didn't need to cry. You needed to leave. I nodded. And I did. I know. A pause. You don't have to forgive me, he said. I already did. He blinked. Before I knew you were sorry, I added. A small breath escaped his lips. Regret soft and late. He stepped forward, hands slightly raised like he wanted to offer something. I don't want to be in the next book, he said. You won't be. That was the truest goodbye we ever had. He left quietly, and I didn't turn around to watch. That night, Daniel and I sat by the fireplace. I told him everything. He just listened, then kissed the top of my head and whispered, You handled it with grace. I'm proud of you. And I thought, if Liam had stayed, I would have never known what it was like to be loved without fear. To be listened to, respected, celebrated. Not because I fought for it, but because someone gave it willingly. I opened my laptop before bed and typed a new sentence. Closure isn't about getting answers. It's about knowing you no longer need them. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and fell asleep in the arms of a man who never made me question my worth. Fall settled into our town like a soft blanket. Leaves painted the sidewalks amber and gold. Cafes smelled like cinnamon and calm. People walked slower, as if even the city had started breathing more deeply. Daniel and I had built routines that felt like rituals. Sunday mornings were for farmers markets. Friday nights were blanket forts and old films. Wednesday evenings were quiet. We each read in silence side by side, sharing glances over steaming mugs. Love, I realized, didn't have to be noisy to be known. It just had to stay. Gently. Steadily. And Daniel always stayed. The book's release brought opportunities one hadn't expected. A podcast interview. A feature in a women's magazine. A modest but growing online following. Mostly women saying things like, "This book helped me leave. Your words found me in the middle of my own ending. Thank you for surviving so I could too." I read each message with my hand over my heart, because I remembered what it was like to search for signs. To scroll late at night, hoping for a post or sentence that would give me the strength to walk away. And now I had become that sentence for someone else. There was no fame, no red carpets, but there was impact. And that, to me, was louder than applause. One night, after hosting a small book club Q&A in a cozy studio space, I walked home alone. The cold bit at my cheeks. The moon hung low like it had slowed down just to keep me company. I passed a window and caught my reflection. Hair tousled. Eyes soft. Lips curled in the kind of smile that doesn't need permission. I didn't look like the girl Liam once left behind. I looked like the woman who knew she deserved to be chosen, and finally chose herself. At home, Daniel had lit candles. "Successful event?" he asked, handing me a blanket. "Very. Any tears?" "Only the good kind." He pulled me into a hug. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat on the couch, sharing silence the way we once shared pain. Fully and without apology. Weeks passed. The world moved. Liam didn't reach out again. And I didn't expect him to. I sometimes wondered what he was doing. Not out of longing, but out of simple human curiosity. Was he happy? Had he learned? Did he still think of me when certain songs played? It didn't matter, because I didn't need the answers. I had already outgrown the questions. Daniel proposed to me again. Not with a ring this time, but with a simple question as we sat on the porch one morning. "Do you want forever?" I turned to him, smile already rising. I already chose it. We held hands as the sun crept over the horizon. It wasn't dramatic.
No violins. No speeches.
Just love. The kind that doesn't arrive late or loud, but exactly when it's ready to stay. That night, I wrote the last page of my next book. Some people return hoping to see you cry, but healing is when they show up, and you're too full of peace to offer pain. I closed the notebook, and for the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to write. The winter that followed felt different. Not colder, not harsher, just quieter. Like my life had shed its old skin and was finally standing still. No longer rushing, chasing, bracing. Everything was enough. Our home was filled with the scent of coffee and eucalyptus. The bookshelf sagged from the weight of books we both loved. A new painting hung above the fireplace, one I had painted on a random Tuesday without planning anything. It was of a woman on a swing. Not flying high. Not suspended. Just swinging gently at peace. Daniel said it was his favorite. One evening I hosted a small gathering. Few close friends. Some old acquaintances who'd reached out after the book. At some point in the evening someone asked, "If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" The room went quiet, all eyes on me. I thought for a moment, then said, "I'd tell her she was never hard to love. She just kept offering her heart to people who weren't ready to hold it." Someone clapped softly. Another woman whispered, "Amen." Because they knew. We all did. How often we twist ourselves into shapes we don't recognize just to be seen. And how liberating it is when we finally say no more. That night, after everyone left, I found Daniel sitting on the back porch, sipping tea, eyes on the stars. I curled up beside him, head resting on his shoulder. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" he asked. "For never asking me to be smaller." He kissed the top of my head. "Thank you for never settling for that again." And just like that, I knew this was the life I fought for. Not the relationship, but the self I had grown into. The woman who didn't just survive heartbreak. She authored her freedom. Weeks later, the book hit a milestone. It wasn't a bestseller, but it was being taught in a college class about emotional resilience and narrative healing. A student emailed me, "Your story helped me leave someone who only called when they needed me broken." I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just walked away. I cried reading that. Not because it hurt, but because she had found her ending too. And in some way we were all connected. Women who once waited for calls, who stayed too long in half-love, who were told they were dramatic for needing consistency. We were all writing new stories now. The final message came on a random afternoon. An email. No subject line. Just this: "I drove by your gallery today. Saw your face on the poster. You're really someone now. I used to think you'd always orbit me. But I see now I was the one revolving around you. I wish I'd known your worth back then. You didn't just move on. You moved above me." I didn't reply. I just deleted it. Not with anger. Not with joy. With finality. Daniel came home that evening with fresh flowers. "I was walking by a shop and thought you'd like these." I smiled. "You always do." He placed them in a vase near my newest painting. The woman in the swing now had someone beside her. A man. Not pushing. Not pulling. Just sitting. Matching her pace. 2 years later, I walked by the old cafe where Liam and I used to meet. It had a new name now. New chairs. New laughter. Everything had moved on. Just like I had. I didn't stop. Didn't look through the window for a ghost that once wore his face. I just kept walking. Because healing isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the decision to keep walking when you once would have waited. Back home, Daniel was fixing a loose shelf in the study. He looked up as I entered. "You're glowing," he said. "It's just the light," I smiled. "No," he replied. "It's you." We didn't talk about the past anymore. Not because we avoided it, but because it no longer led us anywhere. The past was a place we had both outgrown. And in its place we built a life filled with ordinary joy. That evening I found a letter I had written long ago, to the girl I used to be. I unfolded it, read it once, then placed it in the fireplace. Not to forget her, but to honor that she made it through. And as the paper curled into flame, I whispered, "You're free now." As I was. Because I am.